Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4, taking a look at another premium ship for World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be looking at this, the SMS Nassau. Here you see it with its Halloween skin. Sort of steampunk-inspired theme, I think. And that said, I have said this before, I actually do rather like this skin, and unlike other premium ships we've reviewed in the past, you can actually earn this one entirely for free without Admiralty backing as part of the Wicked Waves campaign going on right now. As usual, we're going to start with a bit of history, then we'll move into some analysis and stats, and finally finish off with some gameplay. I've left an index in the description in case you want to skip ahead, so then let's just get right down to business. Now, since we're going to be talking about the Nassau as a historic ship, let's go ahead and view her in her historic glory. This is going to be an option to turn off the Halloween skins, apparently coming in future patches, but for now, if you want to look at the ship like this, you have to take the camo off. The Nassau was the lead ship of her class, and the Nassaus collectively would be the first battleships built for Germany in the age of dreadnoughts. These being the ships built around a layout supporting an all big guns theory. Now, to put this out there, I think calling this a dreadnought is a little bit of a stretch, not only because, as you can probably tell, the Germans haven't exactly scaled back the secondary armament by any considerable amount, but also this ship isn't using a steam turbine engine, which would have been common for other dreadnoughts. This is actually using a coal-burning triple expansion engine, which was common among pre-dreadnoughts. Not only that, but the main battery was comprised of 11-inch guns as opposed to 12-inch and larger guns that were being installed on her rivals. I mention this also in part because when we look at ships like the Graf Spee and the Scharnhorst, it's interesting to consider that the size of the gun was considered undergunned on a ship built 3 decades earlier, at least for battleships. One thing that the Nassau was, though, was very well armored. So that said, people call this a dreadnought, so we're going to call it a dreadnought. In total, there would be 4 Nassau-class battleships, including her sister ships, the Posen, the Westfalen, and the Rhineland. The Nassau and Posen would fight at the Gulf of Riga in support of ground operations against the Russian army. There it would engage with the Slava. The 2 Nassau-class dreadnoughts did eventually force the Russian pre-dreadnought to withdraw, eventually, but they scored only 3 hits against her, which may have been the inspiration for German dispersion in the game. All 4 battleships were at the Battle of Jutland, which is more often than not credited as a victory for Germany, but none of the ships were particularly impactful on the result there. The Nassau did earn a bit of history by ramming HMS Spitfire and a Acasta-class Royal Navy destroyer, but not the Acasta that we know from the game. That was, of course, sunk by the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. The Nassau managed to shoot away basically all of the Spitfire superstructure, but the little boat did manage to get back to port, taking about a 20-foot section of the Nassau's armor plating along with it. Her sister ship, the Posen, also managed to ram a ship during the engagement, though somewhat less intentionally. The SMS Posen ran into the SMS Elbing, a light German cruiser, but unlike the Spitfire, the Elbing was too badly damaged to make it back to port and was scuttled. All 4 Nassau-class ships survived the war, technically. When the majority of the German high seas fleet was interred at Scapa Flow, the Germans were allowed to keep the Nassaus in Germany, probably because they were fairly dated even by that point. However, when the Germans chose to sink their own navy rather than let the Allies divide it among themselves like prizes, the Nassaus were awarded in their place. All 4 of the battleships were handed over and would be scrapped within 3 years. As for how the Nassaus perform in-game, well, let me start by saying this. Wer hat 2 Daumen und mag die Nassau? Dieser Mann. I can say this both in part for Celiacs in the game, and also because I like this ship too. but not because it's all that good. In fact, the Nassau is a curious collection of tough but fragile, undergunned but overarmed, and sluggish but nimble. For people who are looking for a lower level ship to use as a secondary build, it can be a lot of fun, and certainly if you can earn it for free, then it's worth its price. For purposes of comparison, I'm going to compare this ship to the USS Arkansas, the Tier 3 premium American battleship, which up until this point was the premium ship least likely to hit anything with its main battery, with the most impressive array of secondary guns. If you haven't played the Arkansas, it's pretty much a Wyoming, it just has a much better secondary armament. Starting with hit points, the Nassau has a tiny pool of hit points, more than 8,000 less than the Arkansas. Actually, it has more than 5,000 less hit points than just about any battleship in the game, which makes the ship very fragile. It does make up for that somewhat by having a very thick armor belt, 400 millimeters, which is among the most armored, I believe actually tied for the most well-armored Tier 3 battleship in the game. The Nassau also, historically, had turtleback armor, meaning that you shouldn't get citadeled in this ship, though I'm not exactly sure how that works when these turrets are pushed all the way to the outside of the ship. Also, you only have 13% torpedo reduction, which is terrible. Moving on to armament, you have 12 11-inch guns mounted in 6 turrets. This is somewhat less impressive than the 12-inch guns mounted on the Arkansas. The range on these guns are pretty comparable. You're going to get about 1,000 more damage per shot, though, with the Arkansas if you do manage to citadel a ship, but the Nassau's guns do reload in about 2/3 of the time. The other thing to consider is that the Arkansas mounts all of its guns in 3 pairs of super firing turrets right down the center line. This allows you to shoot as many as 12 guns in a broadside and 8 guns while kiting away from the enemy. The Nassau, on the other hand, can get 6 guns to face in just about any direction it wants to, but it can never get more than 8 on one target at one point. Now, as a strange result of the fact that we're playing a video game, if you drive in a weird serpentine pattern, you can technically get about 10 of your guns, more or less, directly forward or directly behind you at different points during a reload cycle. But keep in mind, the Nassau's turret rotation is glacially slow. The other thing to consider when looking at these main armaments is the Nassau is unlikely to citadel very many ships other than cruisers. The 11-inch guns here simply don't have the punch to really punish other battleships, and a lot of the time you're going to spend probably shooting HE. As for secondaries, I will point out these numbers are based on an 11-point captain with similar perks and equipment. The Arkansas can shoot 21 127mm guns out to a range of about 5.9 kilometers every 5.6 seconds without Von Hipper. This ship was probably the best Tier 3 candidate for a secondary build in the game, and then came the gun-loving insanity that is strapped to the Nassau. 4 88mm guns firing to 6.4 kilometers every 3.2 seconds, 12 more 88mm guns with the same range, damage, and reload speed, and another 12 150mm guns firing AP every 6.9 seconds. There's a considerable amount of disagreement about whether a secondary build is a great idea or not, but I challenge you to tell me that when you see all of these guns firing, it is not sexy. Moving on though, your AA is pretty weak, not really a big deal for now, and actually the Arkansas has no AA whatsoever to compare it to. For maneuverability, the Nassau is pretty slow, but at nearly 24 knots it is faster than a lot of Tier 3 battleships. It's around 2.5 knots faster than the Arkansas, which may not seem like a lot, but it's more than 10% faster. The rudder shift on the Nassau is also just about best in class. Your turning circle is actually really tight. Since the Nassau is pretty wide, expect to bleed a lot of speed in turns, but you're going to need this kind of maneuverability to do what you're really meant to do in this ship. And finally, we come to concealment. The Nassau is fairly small for a battleship, and it is rewarded by being slightly more stealthy than average. But for a battleship, I'm not too worried about this stat personally. You're not playing this ship to be subtle. Alright, so let's go ahead and get stuck into some gameplay with this Nassau. So we're going to be on New Dawn. I will go ahead and flash my commander up on the screen. No surprise there, Celiacs. And as you can see, I've chosen pretty much all of the secondary perks, so I feel like that's really what this ship is good at, and you might as well lean into it. If you want to try to gun people down with your guns, fine, but they're not all that impressive. For the sake of the review, I am going to go ahead and keep the Halloween camo on, at least until I have the ability to hide it. I do like the camo, I've said that before, but it does look really out of place. And kind of gaudy next to how pretty the other ships are. So anyway, we are moving towards the middle, which might seem like a strange choice, but I make strange choices. I like the middle here mostly because I am going to get into a lot of knife fights, at least that's my plan. And as you see, there's only 2 destroyers, so I stand a pretty decent chance of not getting stalked by one if I go in this direction. Now, since I do have this set up as a brawler build, that means that the range of my primary guns is not all that impressive. We're right around 12 kilometers, and obviously we still can't even hit that Duguay-Turon way out there on the enemy spawn. Sometimes I'm not sure about why people go towards those islands in the north. It kind of feels weird to me, because it's like, we're playing Capture the Base. There's nothing up there. I guess it's just habit. So we're still not in range of anything, really. We have been spotted by aircraft, which means we have the pleasure of probably taking some damage here in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and try to get some shells out on that Duguay-Turon. There you see kind of the sort of normal dispersion. I'm happy to hit with 2 shots. We set him on fire. Hopefully he doesn't put that out immediately, but if he does, hopefully somebody can set him on fire again. It's a little hard to tell how fast that Wyoming's trying to go. On second thought, he's probably backing up. Yeah, we land those shells not particularly close to target off the front bow. But we're kind of out of range at this point. I'm going to see if I can't set that Duguay-Turon on fire again. I don't lead him enough, but the shell follow view that you can use with preset 1 or 2 kind of tells me his heading and speed. Doesn't look like he was going too fast, and it looks like he's going pretty much straight right to left. Or left to right, whatever. East to west. West to east. He's going west to east. We've got this. It's all figured out. Driving boats, very much an intuitive adventure for TacticAngel sometimes. We're hoping he pops out around that corner. We don't see him just yet, so that's no fun. There we go. Just in time to waste an island. We get a couple shells over and a couple shells into him. We have just cleared the 4,000 damage threshold. Really impressive. And as you see, the shells reload pretty quick. At this sort of range, it's actually pretty comfortable to use these guns. It's pretty fun to actually pick on cruisers with this ship. The thing about cruisers at this level is they pretty much all have torpedoes, so that's something to worry about, and that's one reason why I suggest you remain at speed in this particular ship, because you're going to want to be able to use that rudder shift. You're going to have to dodge the 13% torpedo reduction is not really going to help you very much. So we get spotted again by some aircraft. It's probably just going to sit above me because there's really not much that my AA is going to be able to do about it. And we're going to start worrying about these other ships as they start to come into range. This is one of the other things that's kind of nice about the Nassau. If you saw, as soon as I look over there, I've basically got two guns pointed in the right direction. Now, I don't really want to engage those guys right now because they're all coming from the south, and if I turn into them, I'll have like 3 or 4 people to deal with. Instead, what we're going to try to do is come up here. Right now, what we're doing is wasting people's damage control, and there you see I'm working in one of the guns that I have on the other side of the ship to get a little bit extra DPM. Depending on how well you can pick up these extra targets, you can actually make quite an impact on your overall performance by doing these little serpentine maneuvers. You see I'm kind of waggling the ship a little bit. It also helps that I'm engaging 2 different targets, one off my starboard and one off my port. We continue to land HE out there. We're getting some... Well, we're not getting any damage off of that guy, but obviously he put out my fire, and now he's on fire at least 2 times. So I'm going to aim towards the back of his ship, hoping that maybe we can make it worse. And we do. He is strayed within 6 kilometers. We easily dodged those torpedoes. I love the look of the secondaries. Since we dodged some torpedoes, I feel a little easier about nosing out there at this angle. This is going to give me a little bit more chance to deflect that Koenig shots. Fire on the front of the Koenig is out, but at this point I'm shooting AP. We end up taking him out. Since I still have the AP loaded, I'm going to shoot at this Duguay-Touron, hoping that I might do some damage. That's real nice. You don't get a lot of those, particularly against French targets, but when you do land a Citadel on one of the French cruisers, it feels good, man. It feels good. Now, he does have torpedoes, and I'm very worried about that. I would really like to kill him before he gets a whole lot closer to me, but we're keeping at least at half speed so that we can continue to maneuver. I'm feeling like he probably just launched, which is why I'm hitting the brakes. We make a good decision there. And now you can see we're firing off the starboard and the port bow with those secondaries, racking up a pretty respectable number of hits. Most of these are probably only doing 100, maybe 300 damage at a time, but obviously they're doing some damage because we get a close combat award. Now we're shooting into that Wyoming. Now with the AP, we're not going to be getting a lot of Citadels. With the German dispersion, we'll be lucky to even hit. The problem is he's just too darn far away. If I was like 3 kilometers closer to him, 100% accuracy. Or at least 80, 90. It'd be pretty good. There we lose a turret. That actually happens quite a bit. And then rather than trying to fight the inevitable, I put some shots into the aft portion of his ship because I know that it's slightly less armored. Now this game is pretty well won. Not a crazy impressive game, but you know, it's a demonstration of what this ship is capable of, and really what you want to do with the Nassau, which is go out there and get into these sort of close combat engagements. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little review, this little replay. I will leave a link to another replay that I did in the description, which is a little bit more on the outside of what the Nassau can do. But once again, I don't feel bad about saying if you can get this ship for free, I have a lot of fun with it. I'm not sure if you want to spend a lot of money trying to finish out the campaign just for it, but certainly it's a fairly cheap premium if you get really close and you need to buy the Admiralty backing and one or two of the renown levels. In any case, thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.